Yeah. Members, good evening. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Development Committee. I will now read out the emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the entry doors to the hall. Continue straight on, go through the 2 sets of double doors on the right-hand side to the car park, which is the assembly point. Please do not delay your evacuations to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Please switch off mobiles or turn them to silence. Members, there is a need to use microphones during this meeting. When I invite you to speak, please wait until there is a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. Please, where possible, assist in passing microphones to each other and use the hand gel and antibacterial wipes on the tables if you do touch the microphones. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and then against recommendations, and will also ask for a show of hands for those wishing to abstain from voting. Thank you. Agenda items 1 and 2, apologies for absence and substitutes, please. Councillor Davis. Who's he substituting for? We have received apologies for absence from Councillor Daniel FD, Councillor Adrian Ease and Councillor Lisa Newport. Councillor Dave Sperring is substituting for Councillor Daniel FD. Councillor Michael Hoy is substituting for Councillor Adrian Ease, and Councillor Christine Mason is substituting for Councillor Lisa Newport. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. Councillor Newport, Councillor Cheryl Rowe, Councillor Simon Wootton, and I've got Councillor Gadsden, but I don't think she's here, is she? No. No. Right, okay, thank you. Agenda 4, agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of September. Are these agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you. To receive declarations of interest. Councillor Newport.
He's not a committee member, so he doesn't need to.
He doesn't. Transparency.
Thanks, item number 7, non-pecuniary interest as a tenant of the landowner.
Thank you. Is there any others, members? No, thank you. Agenda item.
Mention the addendum.
The mic will be coming to you, Councillor Hoy.
I think I'm also a tenant of the landowner for item number 7.
Thank you very much. Any others, members? No. Agenda item 6 is the site of Bulwood Hall Lane, Hockley. Mike Stranks will present the officer's report. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be recalling this site of the former prison located back from the main road area of Hockley. If we could jump to the layout plan, please. Members will recall...
Sorry, Mike, have you got your mic? Sorry, yep. Mike, have you got your mic on?
I have. How about that? That's better.
Can you hear members, everyone? Yeah, thank you.
To recap, this is the site of the former Her Majesty's Prison, Bulwood Hall, that members will be aware was given planning permission to develop for 70 houses. The application you have, which you'll have seen, concerns a single issue of obscure glazing to windows. Members will recall that we granted planning permission with a rather blanket approach to obscure glazed first floor side windows, that they be obscure glazed and fixed shut. And I think somewhere in the course of the construction, the applicants installed clear glazed windows, and you dealt with an application in April of this year where they tried to overcome your concerns, but members were unhappy with the hinge arrangement, arguing that there could be overlooking through those. So the application you have before you concerns the buildings usefully coloured red on this plan. They're the dark shaded dwellings that you can see in solid colour on the plans here. And these ones you'll see, they open out onto open spaces. I don't know if members can see the triangles that you can see on each side here. If we zoom in a little bit, we might see some of them, but I'm conscious we'd lose the whole layout. That's better, thanks. That's good. You'll see that what the applicants are now asking you is for just this select group of dwellings that are in the solid block to be allowed to retain the clear glazed opening windows. And their argument being that the windows of concern overlook onto open areas like we see here, less so for this one, which I'll come on to, because there's 3 plots that you'll see in the officer report that we disagree with. If we could look at 2 plan plot 1, please. The architects have usefully given us a layout of the site, and you'll see the windows, they'll keep the ones blue, make them obscure glazed, but there's clear glazing these 2, which unfortunately it's inverted, but these look out here. In the case of plot 1, we say that's acceptable because it overlooks the open space. But if we jump to 3 plan, please. Plot 11 is one of these 2 that were off the main, group of 4 off the main group. And you'll see that there's 2 windows either side of the front projection. We're happy that the outward facing windows can be retained obscured, but clear, but the inner facing ones that overlook this area here of privacy with some advantage possibly of being able to look into the buildings, we're unhappy about. And if we jump to the next plan, please. The reverse is true. This is the end unit, which is a mirror of the one we was just looking at, where this window is of concern to officers, which overlooks through here. And if we then go to 8 plan, please. How's that? Yep, sounds good, thank you. If we look at the plan here, this is outward facing but at an angle so that the view twists out this way, which officers feel we can accept. But our concern is this window here, which overlooks the quiet areas, the rear garden spaces of that adjoining group of dwellings. So the upshot is we can almost recommend to you to support the applicant with the exception of the last 3 plots that I showed you. And therefore, you have the capability to be able to vary the applicant's condition. Instead of accepting all the plots proposed, officers have adapted that condition to accept the numbers of dwellings that they're proposing, with the exception of the 3 plots that I've just pointed out, where there is still, in officers' concern, that overlooking problem. Now, as you've heard me probably say before, when we have these variations of condition, it's actually a legal requirement that although we're dealing with a single issue for just the obscure glazing windows, nice straightforward single issue, we're obliged as a planning authority to review the whole decision notice and reissue the consent. And that's in light of where conditions have been discharged on the earlier permissions granted, they're no longer necessary. So all the conditions actually get all out of kilter. And this is one such where what was condition 5, so the applicant has submitted the application to vary condition 5, because of the dispensing of other conditions no longer necessary and do not need to be reimposed, this now becomes condition 3. So we're recommending that you revise what becomes condition 3 along the lines that I've explained, that it's almost allowing all the plots that they've said, but for the specified windows that overlook that I pointed out. I'm hoping, Chairman, that's clear. So the recommendation is approval, subject to the revised condition 5, which now becomes condition 3.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cheryl Rowe, have you got? You're the ward member. Have you got anything? No, it's visiting members first. Thank you. Councillor Sperring? Oh, sorry. Is there any other members, visiting members that would like to speak on this? No. Councillor Sperring?
Thank you. The issue regarding the level of being the height of 1.7 metres has been met in both areas, so yeah, I can't see anything that I can disagree with Mike Shanks' recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor David Merrick? Have you got anything being a ward member? Thank you. Councillor Smith, and then it'll be Councillor Christine Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. We've discussed this item on a number of occasions and slowly evolved a solution. The application which Mr Stranks has outlined with the exceptions also outlined is, in my opinion, a fair description of a good way forward. So actually, Chairman, I'm happy to move this application.
Have you a seconder?
Thank you.
We have a recommendation for approval. Is everyone?
Mrs Mason.
Oh, sorry, Mrs Mason. Have you got a microphone?
So it's only speaking to the approval now.
So you're only speaking to the approval now?
I just want to say that I've been involved in plans of this, and I know the amount of work that the officers do and the detailed work that goes into it. And I'd like to just acknowledge the amount of work they have done, and certainly I would have seconded or moved refusal if it hadn't already been done so, assuming that the conclusion with those 3 plots are the exception. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, we've had a recommendation for approval. Can you all please raise your hands for approval?
If you're in favour.
If you're in favour.
Well, it sounds like you're coercing.
Yeah. It's unanimous. Thank you, members. Members, have you seen the addendums for item 7, and have you all read them, please? You don't need any, no one needs any time to read them. Thank you very much.
Stay on the location plan.
So we'll move on to item 7, which is the land north of the National Grid, London Road, Aurora. And it will be, oh, Mike Frank again. Can't hear you, Mike. Sorry.
Members will be broadly familiar with this site. The A130 dual carriageway through here, Dollyman's Farm access into there, and Old London Road A129 at the top here with a collection of number of dwellings here. Our site concerns this area that you see here. Before we leave this plan, you'll see on the addendum that there's a letter been received, and some of the details of the letter actually was quite critical that they weren't notified. That particular resident is about a third of a mile from that point on this plan. The Chichester backs onto this field about here somewhere on this scale, and it's up the corner, if members remember where the football fields are and the 4 bungalows. So the government's advice on consulting residents is that we consult within 4 metres of the site boundary, this area here, and you see there's no one actually within that. But we went further, some 26 residents in this vicinity. We consulted them plus a site notice, but we wouldn't have gone as far away as has been suggested. So I was just pointing that out before we proceed. If we could go to the 2 plan, please. This isn't before you tonight. This is a previous application which concerned gas-fired emergency generators. The issue behind all this is that particularly renewable energies, solar and wind, it varies the amount of input they can put into the grid. So we approved as an authority a while back an application to have this series of gas-fired boilers that at a flick of a switch, putting it very simply, would be able to be called upon by the national grid to put energy into the network when there was a deficit. Now, the council approved this. It's in the green belt, but there are reasons why this had to be located here, which one in this case was the supply of gas, but other reasons of connectivity to the grid. Just off this plan, there is a substation, large substation that serves the sub-region, and it's necessary for this kind of facility, whatever it might be, to get quick access at this point, also in an area where the grid has capacity. And there's only 2 places out of some 168 choices, both of which are in the green belt, where this could be done. If we could jump to the next one, please. Alongside the gas fire that you've just left, this is a cross-section of the gas fires. You'll see an apparatus here with chimneys on. But if we can jump to the battery storage, there was a company in battery storage on the adjoining parcel of land. I think that's probably 4 plan, if that's it. Yeah. We was just looking at a previous approval for the gas-fired boilers. This is a previous approval for battery storage. Now that's in the bank, that's been approved. If we can now go to 5 plan, please. This is what's before you tonight. The applicants have decided against the use of the emergency fired boilers and are looking to provide further battery storage. The idea being that the renewable energies that are created need somewhere to be stored. You can't hold it back very well. Energy is either in surplus or under capacity, so batteries are the answer where there's surplus generation to be able to store them and call upon them. So what we have here is a different type of arrangement where all of this area now, whereas batteries were previously approved over here, the generators instead of now proposed with batteries. And I'm hoping that's clear. As I said, the considerations are the site is in the green belt, so there has to be very special circumstances, somewhat unique circumstances. And in this case, because there's only 2 or so areas where this could connect to the national grid, that is almost a unique, but for one other site, circumstance. So officers felt that in the terms of the critical infrastructure that this provides to the power network, the capacity that would be needed locally and in the sub-region, coupled with the fact that it's against an existing power facility as a backdrop. We can't see that on this, and I don't think we've got any images of it, but I'm sure members will have seen from the A130 the sort of architecture of the substation. This would sit alongside that. So if you take into account the visual harm, which would have the backdrop of a similar looking type of facility, plus the need, the critical infrastructure need for energy storage, and where it can access the network, officers feel that that amounts to very special circumstances. So the recommendation, Chairman, is approval for the condition, subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you. Councillor Newport, have you anything? No. Thank you. Councillor Stanley?
Any other visiting members?
Any other visiting members? Oh, you have a speaker. Oh,
Is that on? Yes.
sorry, I haven't.
5 minutes.
You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't be that long. Mike set out the scene very clearly. I was just going to add 2 points.
Excuse me, sir, can I ask you who you are, please?
Yes, so my name is Andrew Troop.
So it's for the committee to know who you are.
Thank you, that's right. And I'm a director at Satir Energy. We operate batteries and have done so for 3 or 4 years now. Probably 3 points just to quickly make. One is on the need for these. I'm sure you're all aware that Boris Johnson has further added to the urgency of deployment of renewables. So that absolutely requires us to try and balance out the system, increasingly so. And at the moment, batteries are the best way of doing it. And so it is absolutely fundamental if we're going to continue to try and decarbonise the electricity system. Mike's explained why this particular location is very well suited for it. The second point is the parish council had raised a point about the access and could we use national grid access, and I'm sort of apologising for that because we can't. We would have done if we could have done. We've got a consent now for an alternative access, but just to say to members, it should not be an issue. We've got consent for it anyway, but the amount of traffic that this will require once it's built is incredibly low. I mean, there may be days when nothing turns up at all. There may be a day when two white vans turn up. So there's no traffic generated from this facility effectively. The third thing to say, the final thing just to say, was on decommissioning, because I think that was another point the parish council raised, or one of the members might have raised. So we have to put in place an insurance policy which kicks in at year 10 on this arrangement, where we have to set aside hundreds of thousands of pounds effectively to ensure that it is decommissioned. Right now, it is true to say that the recycling of commercial scale batteries has still to be sorted out. It's happening in Norway, it's happening in Belgium, but all commercial scale batteries now are generally repurposed on solar farms. But this is a lease here which will last for probably 25 years, so it is a long way off, but that is all covered through an insurance policy. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Visiting members, Mr. Councillor Newport? No. Any other visiting members that would like to speak on this? No, thank you. Councillor Stanley? If you ask the mic to be passed over.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There's two things that do concern me. Special circumstances. Special circumstances on the green belt doesn't indicate that putting batteries on there is a good idea. The idea of the green belt is to keep it green belt for the public to walk across and to associate themselves with a green field. Putting batteries on is not quite the same thing. The batteries are in place of the generating station that's there, or was going to be there. So the batteries need to be charged up from the supply that's generated across the other side of the road. They're not generating any electricity, so therefore they're not regenerative. They only supply what they take out, so they'll supply it back into the grid. So there's nothing being generated, it's not reusable, it's not being generated, so reusable in the way of a wind farm or solar energy and that sort of thing is reusable energy. But the reusable energy is coming out of the grid, and therefore, why do we need batteries? The other course that I'm looking at is there's no statement of fireproof in the site should anything go wrong. We've already had a problem with Michelin's farm in the way of fire on the tyres that were set alight. How do we know, is there any fact that's usable to the committee that this cannot happen in this battery container? There's nothing on there I haven't read anything on the information. So I'd like to ask the officers, has that been considered in the way of, and do we have actually a fire service that can take control of that site should that happen?
Thank
I'd
you.
like to ask the officers if we've got anything in that form of protection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Strengths, can I ask you to come back on the question, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, the simple answer on the fire question is no, we don't have anything. I think sometimes we have to be careful that planning sort of gives an opportunity for everybody to express worries and concerns, and there are other agencies working away to make things safe that have no public involvement. And we have to be careful that planning doesn't try to do what perhaps other licensing authorities and things have to. When you think of the mobile phone systems, they go through a certain safety precautions before they are allowed to hit the market. So, you know, I would have thought members can be assured. I take the point about the Michelin's Farm situation, which was burning of waste. But, you know, perhaps they do what they can to make sure things don't catch fire, but I think you can never 100% avoid it, perhaps. But this is a low-key activity. I take the point that there will be electricity stored on the site and the shortages, you know, short circuits and things that may be possible. I don't know. It's not my field. But, you know, normally when equipment is available, it's already gone through various tests before it can be used. That's all I could offer members on that point. And if I may just say about the supply issue, the idea of these batteries is that, say, out in the North Sea or somewhere, they're going to be generating power by wind, or there's going to be solar farms. That power comes into a network. But unlike a product that you might make in a factory and you park it in a warehouse or on open storage or something till it's required, you can't do that with power. The guys on the national grid sort of operate a needle between things. Remember the old jokes they used to say about when EastEnders finished on a cliffhanger or something? Everybody made a cup of tea and the needle shot up. They had to call on a nuclear power station or something to compensate it. Well, they haven't got so much of that now with the absence of coal-fired and things that they used to have. So what they're trying to do is to create batteries whereby the renewable energy that's pumping away during perhaps a windy weather or a sunny day can come into the grid, be stored in these batteries, and then when we get a moment when we need some supply, they can activate the batteries and take that out. That's about as simple as my explanation is, Chairman, but I think members are right that there isn't power generation as such, but it's all about power storage. And when we talk in the Green Belt about very special circumstances, members are right. The idea is that the open spaces should be kept free of building. I perhaps don't say it's necessarily for public access. It's perhaps for the identity of areas to segregate, say, areas from Benfleet, from Rayleigh, from other areas to keep an identity and for the meaningfulness of openness. But if development has a very special justification, I used the term earlier, somewhat unique, if it has to be there for whatever reasons, I used to use the example of a lighthouse. You know, it saves lives, etc. It might be that you need a lighthouse on a certain part of the coast. These days they're done remotely by ships and things, so it's an out-of-date example. But this facility can only connect in very few places where there is capacity in the network to take the connection. And the applicants have surveyed, they tell me, about 168 sites, and only 2 fit the requirements, and they both happen to be in the Green Belt. So the network requires this storage capacity, and to be delivered, it's going to harm the Green Belt somewhere. Now, we've given weight to the fact that it's alongside an existing facility, so visually, yes, there will be an increased footprint of electrical apparatus, but it should be, in our view, the least damaging, and hence why we're recommending to you the way we are. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, may I reply to that, please?
No, because you've had your you've had your 5 minutes, so...
I didn't think I had 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have, unfortunately. It goes so quick.
Could I
And
just
we've got other
reply,
people...
could I just reply to that, please?
Well, we've got other people
As
waiting.
being in the industry for over 50 years.
Councillor Stanley, we've got two other members that need to speak on this, please. One is, well, no, you can pull faces, but that
No,
is the
fine.
way that this
just-
committee is going to be run. You've got other members that need to speak. There's Councillor Christine Mason and Councillor Smith. He's making, and Councillor Hoy. Yes, so it'll be Councillor Smith, Councillor Christine Mason, and Councillor Hoy and Councillor Sperring. That's the order that they've been put down on. Thank you. You first, then Councillor.
Thank you. Notwithstanding the permissions that are already in place, I couldn't disagree more with Councillor Stanley on this occasion. In all the years that I've been involved in planning, I can't think that this committee has ever heard circumstances that are better when it comes to being very special and unique. This is a contribution to our national critical power infrastructure, and that alone would be more than sufficient for me. And then we have the discussion about gas-fired boilers versus batteries and carbon neutrality. You almost don't need to bother with that discussion nowadays. So, Chairman, I feel so passionately about this. I'm happy to move it at this moment in time with the conditions as outlined in the report, and I would invite someone to second me on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Christine Mason.
I'm assuming this is working, is it?
Have you got a little green light at the back?
Yeah.
It is, I'm told, so I have no idea. I just wanted some clarification from the officers, please, on certain points. Could they show again the relationship of the road to the area? Okay, thank you. I think I get it from there. And could they, on the more defined map, show the area of flood risk that's referred to in the report?
What page are you referring to, please?
They say there's an area of flood risk 3 where the access is going through, and that it will have a knock-on effect for other areas. Crudely.
7.1. Thank you.
Any officer?
Yep. Sorry. Yep.
Sorry, Chairman. Luckily, we've got the author of the report with us. If Katie would be able to point out to me the area of flood risk, please. The extent of the area of flood risk. I understand it's literally that area of the junction.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, I haven't seen, or if I have, I've missed it, any reference to the height of these storage containers in relation to the approved plan. Is it possible to give that information? I'm not talking about the land that's covered, but the heights in relation to the approved plan. In other words, which are the highest and by how much?
Oh, there's a substantial difference. Chairman, these are, I can't quite read that, but I think we're talking 2.8 metres or so. They're like container boxes, okay? Now, if we can go to the cross-section we had there of the gas-fired ones, they are similar, but I think higher, but they also have tall chimneys on. So, yeah, if we can, that's it. Members with better eyes than me may be able to work that out, but the chimney top is 15 metres, but I'm not sure where the bulk is, but I'm pretty sure that's a lot higher than the 3 metres or so of the batteries that you're looking at tonight. Maybe you can, compare the battery that was in the previous shot. The plan we have with it, that's it, stop. I imagine the batteries are probably about this height, and you see the apparatus in the gas burners was a far more substantial piece of kit.
Thank you, that's more than
But
adequate.
I can't tell you the difference in height, I'm sorry.
Can I just
No,
come
but
in
I
there?
think the visual difference means the visual impact would be less.
Councillor Mason, can I just come in? On 7.12 page item 3, the facility would comprise of 108 single-storey steel cabins known as E-houses. The e-houses would have a depth of 12 metres, a width of 2.4 metres and a height of 2.9 metres.
Yes, but that doesn't say the relation to the gas, which is
No,
what I
no,
was
but I
asking.
say that does tell you the thing.
Thank you. If we're going to be timed, Madam Chairman...
We're all our time for 5 minutes.
Right, if we're going to be timed, perhaps you could do the normal convention and give us the 1 minute warning.
Yeah,
which
sorry.
normally happens. But I don't think that happened with Councillor Stanley, which is why he was probably a little perplexed. Right, I certainly support in principle the capture and storage of energy that would otherwise be lost or unutilised, and acknowledge the importance of this under the National Policy Statement for Energy under the MPFF, and that this is considered a material planning consideration that must be taken into account in the determination of a planning application. Protection of the green belt also needs to be acknowledged in relation to the framework. There is a general presumption against inappropriate development within the green belt, and development should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt, and we must also give substantial weight to that. The officer report states that the current proposal is considered to amount to inappropriate development, but they consider the harm to the green belt outweighed by the benefits, although this is of course subjective. The report states that the access road is through a flubber area, but I think that the officer has demonstrated that that is not an issue. The concern I do have
1
is...
minute, Mrs Mason.
Thank you. The Environment Agency have said they will only be satisfied if we are satisfied. I would have expected a more certain and unqualified agreement, and not one that puts the responsibility of the flooding assessment onto this authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hoy? We need a microphone. So.
Apparently it's on, hopefully it is. I'll be brief. I'm not sure who managed to second that first. I might have done or I might not have done, I don't know. I echo Councillor Smith's words. I think at the moment special circumstances do exist. We're in a moment of climate breakdown. This will go towards reducing the effects of that. If we don't do something like this, the green belt will disappear. It will be flood belt, if you like. It will get worse. So I've got no problem at all in supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Sperring, could you pass the microphone over and wipe it, please?
Get a special price for getting into these. There you go, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't really have any great issues regarding the actual site, the project itself, until our colleague here gave a representation talking about decommissioning. I don't think I'll be around perhaps in 10 or 15 years' time, but I wasn't over impressed with the, should we say, dubious how we're going to do it. I think it was a bit suspect. I'd like to go on to some of the issues relating to the ecological situation. I noticed that one of the ponds might disappear. Can't understand why we can't just create another one, but that's another issue. We were talking about putting in new trees and hedgerows, and then further down it says, but of course if there's any changes, these could disappear. I think we need to get something sorted out there. And again, we seem to be, yeah, I fully endorse the need for this, but I don't think, you know, we've got to make sure that issues do get monitored. Who's going to monitor the flood scenario? I said it says can be asked by the local authority. I think we should have more than just be asked. We should have a regular system whereby it is reported to our officers on a yearly basis, not that we just have to ask for it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got a question for Mike Stranks. Can we ask for a condition to be put on this, that trees are planted?
Chairman, I was trying to look to the recommendation. We could put a landscaping condition on, rather than just limit it to tree planting. Landscaping per se is far more beneficial. It can involve mounding. There is, if I recall, wildflower meadows and things that obviously the trees could enhance. And there is, I think, a tree buffer, if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, on this side here. But we could better that with having a specific condition that asks the applicants to submit species. I think there is a landscaping plan, is there? Can we have a look at that? Where I think the applicant has already preempted your concerns and set out a landscaping scheme. So you could condition that, I'm told there is a condition, that casualty of not having written these reports, Chairman, I'm afraid. Condition 4? No, that's not the one.
No, it's 1.8.
My mistake. Yes, there is a condition, my mistake, that asks that landscaping be undertaken, the development should be undertaken in accordance with the landscaping scheme to be approved by the authority. But there is a scheme you see before you where the applicant has set out that. Now you could condition that, or as we're suggesting, ask for it to be resubmitted but bettered,
Well,
if that's your...
I've just been pointed out, and I do apologise, I did miss it, on 7.118, item 4, that is, the development shall be undertaken in accordance with the landscaping scheme to be approved by the local planning authority. So it is there. So, right, members, we've had a motion put on the table and seconded. All in favour, please, of this proposal. Thank you. I've just been advised Councillor Stanley would like to speak again.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to point out also, which I didn't finish my briefing to you, there is quite a lot
You're
of
speaking
nature-
to the motion now, aren't you?
Yeah, speaking to the motion, yeah. The motion is to approve, yes, I know. I was going to ask at the same time, is there a noise factor, and also how much disturbance to the wildlife in that area? I'm told there are skylarks there nesting, not nesting at the moment because they wouldn't be there, but there are skylarks nesting. And I would like to know that, as from Councillor Spearing's observation, that there will be sufficient material there in the way of trees or shrubs or whatever, and also ponds. So if that is the condition on what you're speaking of, then yes, thank you very much.
It's already there. I did apologise that I'd missed it on 7.118, that the, item 4, there is
They
a
did say-
landscaping. So if you look on your note,
Yeah.
on your documents, there is also already a landscaping, and I actually missed a paragraph, so
Thank you.
I do apologise for that.
No,
Right,
thank you.
members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, members, we've had a motion. It's been seconded. All for in favour of approval, please put your hands up, and it's on your count. All against? Any abstentions? One abstention. That is carried. So it's 12 for approval, 1 abstention. Thank you, members. We now go on to item 8, which is Michelin's. Now, again, have you read the addendum for this, please, members? Right, who's going to Yes. Oh, Mike Strength, it's you again. Very popular tonight. Yeah.
It's not.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, so I can't work out my red and greens.
Chair,
Thank you, Chairman.
can you speak up a bit? 'Cause I can't.
Yeah, I can speak up. Yeah, I'm good at that. This application was deferred at the meeting of the 23rd of September to enable members to visit the site. Specifically, it concerns the area that you see, the greater part of those lines on that site there. And members saw at the site visit that this part is under construction, which by itself doesn't concern you tonight, but just to help you get your bearings. If we can jump to O2, please. The issue, the deal breaker before us is the council's allocation of a gypsy site, which is in your allocations plan. It's a policy to be achieved, and it's part of the greater site that we see here. So the site has a mixed allocation overall, mostly for industrial, but also for the gypsy and traveller site. If we could jump to O3, please. Members saw at the site visit, this is a computer-generated image, a 3D view, which nicely shows the context. The development that's currently under construction, nearly finished, that we saw at the site there. The application that concerns you tonight is for this larger building at the back. You'll see from the report that officers are content with all the other aspects other than the issue about the conflict with the development plan, which I'm going to labour on tonight. And my colleague Katie Rogers went through in detail previously when he deferred the item. If we could just hover on the O4 plan, please. Most of the site, as you'll see in the material that you've seen, benefits from outline planning permission. This is the layout plan that accompanied what we called a hybrid application because it comprised of outline for the part of the site that concerns you tonight, with the exception of this area here, but in detail what they're building or nearly finished at the front here. But you'll note that the area of the allocation for the gypsy site was undeveloped, not part of the outline permission granted. And if we could just jump to O5, please. You'll see that in that outline application that you considered, the applicants at that time indicated with these large arrows the principle of access to serve the gypsy site allocation. It was an indicative plan, but it shows, in my view, a degree of intent. If we could jump to O6, please. This is the application that's now before you. This is the balance of the site. The gypsy site allocation is in this part of the layout. The site that's under construction is this part off plan, as we might say. But you're looking at the large blue shaded building there that is for consideration and was deferred last time. I'd ask members to note that it's a full application in its own right. It doesn't form part of reserved matters to the previous outline. The outline is relevant for the way that the site is being developed, but this is a standalone application in its own right. If we could go to O7, please. In decision making, this is the site as a whole. This is how it would be in its entirety if planning approval was granted. But in planning decision making, the development plan allocation, the gypsy site allocation, the industrial application for the rest of the site, that carries in planning substantial weight. The allocations have been subject to testing through a government inspector holding a public inquiry, through objections, through publicity, going through drafts to get to the point that the plan is adopted and by yourselves and becomes an allocation that we work to. And in the balance terms, it has substantial weight. It's very, very weighty. So your starting point is that your allocation policies said that that site should be available for gypsies and travellers. And the inspector, in dealing with the local plan, that might have been some time now, but found that there was no objection to that allocation in terms of any suitability. It got passed through any tests, any concerns that they had at that time. There has been a history of complicated ownership. I won't go into the details because that would be unfair on the persons involved, but members will recall that there was prosecutions, the site ownership changed to the family then sold it to, I believe, the current applicants, but I may be wrong on that. But what I'm trying to demonstrate is the earlier owner wasn't exactly pleased with the council taking action with him at the time. Hardly somebody would go into partnership. That, subject to that, different family members took on the site, and that the current applicants have only been the owners, I think, since around 3 years ago, something like that. So there's been changes in ownership, and there's been other things going on which hasn't helped bring the site forward. The aspirations of the council for the site as a whole were also to relocate the Rayleigh Recycling Centre and a desire to get other industrial areas, such as the Royal Industrial Estate, away from the housing areas and located to these premises now. We realise those aspirations won't be achieved. Now, while some of those uses may take up the units that are already being built, that's a matter for them. Paragraph 122 of the National Planning Policy Framework, part of the national government's strategy for planning, does make clear that it accounts for the need for decisions to reflect changes in demand for land allocated in development plans where informed by land availability studies. Now, the applicant has made a clear case that there's a demand for their unit. Officers have no problem with that. But where the local authority considers there to be no reasonable prospect of an application coming forward for the use allocated, in this case the Gypsy site, the government advises that a plan application should be reconsidered in a plan review, possibly deallocated, or in the meantime, alternative uses could be supported. And this is the difference between us and the applicants. Officers go one way, hence the recommendation to you. The applicant has got a strong case the other way. It's very much on a fine line, okay? Now, members will see on the addendum that there's been extensive material submitted by the applicants, and as you've all had a chance to read it, I don't propose to go through it in detail. I also believe you've been approached direct with letters that we have got copies of, and a flyer, I believe, that was produced today that repeats some of the material. So the point being that even up to this last minute, you've had quite a lot of information from the applicant. To summarise that, the applicants feel that it will not be possible for the council to realise the Gypsy site allocation. They're talking from their experience of the sites that they've so far developed, the decontamination, the construction costs, etc. They've got a basis there that's in some of the material of at least, they think, 1.3 million. It's not a total amount, comprising site acquisition and provision for the known costs. There are further potential costs for decontamination of 0.4 of a million, plus the need for a substantial landscape buffer between the Gypsy site and the commercial. So the costs would be quite considerable. They're saying that as landowners now that we're dealing with these people as the landowners, they would be unwilling to give up the site, obviously subject to acquisition. They would want to develop it out, so they would object, if you like. That means that the council has to consider compulsory acquisition to deliver the plan allocation that it is made earmarked. They're saying that because they wouldn't be likely to give access, notwithstanding what they showed you in the outline application, that the site will be landlocked so that you wouldn't be able to achieve access to deliver the site. And they're also saying that there's been lack of interest shown from the travelling community in bringing the site forward. They're pointing out that the appeal inspectors on a number of Gypsy site applications that we've fought has been critical of the lack of progress in site delivery, and that they also have advice from council that is also set out that says the council's position is not robust. They have offered, because you need to mitigate the loss of the allocation, they've offered a unilateral undertaking of a payment of £600,000, 0.6 of a million, that could be put towards providing an alternative site should planning permission be granted. There are benefits that they say should be taken into account as well, that there would be over 30,000 square metres of commercial floor space in this building, an average in the construction stage of about 190 construction jobs, and up to 800 new full-time equivalent jobs to support the local economy, a post-pandemic boost of somewhere between 28 million and 56 million per annum for the local economy, and approximately 1 million per annum in business rates that they're asking you to take into consideration. Now, officers say there's a lot in favour of this scheme. We have no problem with the physical planning sides, and there's lots of merit that we've just touched on. But there remains, in officers' view, a clear shortfall in the provision of the unmet need and demand for gypsy and traveller sites in the district. And if we lost the allocation, whether it can be realised or not, we would be going, in my view, somewhat backwards. And it's for members to decide. It's a very fine balance now. It's gone from being heavily in favour of the development plan to, when you take into account what the applicant is saying, it's coming back up level. Now, for officers' position, we think the scales are just tipped, because as far as we can determine, at least at the time of producing the reports, there is still perhaps a remote possibility or whatever that the council might compulsory acquire the site. There's nothing official. We've got no reports to full council or members or whatever on which we can rely. So we're recommending a cautious approach, that in the moment in time, from what we know so far, the balance means that the application should be refused on the basis of the conflict with the development plan for the reason that's set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker for this, Mr. Tim Rainbird. You have, as per the others, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Great. Can you hear me?
No, you're not. Are you aware?
Excellent. Good evening, Chair and members of the Development Committee. I am Tim Rainbird, the agent speaking on behalf of the applicant and the landowner of Michelin Farm Star UK Rayleigh Propco Limited. First, I would like to thank members for attending the site visit on Saturday the 15th of October. I hope that it was useful to see the allocated employment site alongside the gypsy and traveller allocation and aid you in reaching what we hope will be a positive decision on this full planning application this evening. I would also like to thank officers for the addendum report, which was published yesterday afternoon. As before, your officers are recommending refusal on a single ground, namely a departure from your development plan by way of the loss of gypsy and traveller site allocation. Officers are recommending refusal on the basis that they believe there to be a reasonable prospect of the GT1 allocation coming forward with an application for gypsy and traveller accommodation, namely through the compulsory purchase of the land by the council. Perhaps most significantly, your officer's addendum explicitly states that if the leader and the cabinet decided not to pursue the compulsory purchase of the gypsy and traveller site, officers would be recommending this application for approval. The officer's addendum also recognises that the evidence needed to support the reasonable prospect test is very limited. The following significant weaknesses are acknowledged. No substantive work has been undertaken to inform the CPO process. Nothing has been progressed beyond an initial request back in March. There is no defined time frame setting out the intended progression of compulsory purchase of the land. This has been requested by your officers since August and has not yet been provided. Officers also recognise that the CPO process is complicated and it is possible that the Council will not decide to pursue this course of action. Members will also be aware that the prospect of a CPO was set out in the allocations plan some 8 years ago. In that 8 years, no programme or proposal has come forward to CPO the allocated land at Michelin Farm. All of these facts would suggest that there is a real prospect that a CPO will never materialise and that a possibility, or as you've heard this evening, a remote chance of this happening is simply not sufficient in this instance to warrant refusal of planning permission. Setting to one side the lack of evidence to demonstrate that the CPO is a reasonable prospect, the allocated gypsy and traveller site has clear suitability and deliverability issues, as your officers have summarised this evening. We believe that the land would be an inappropriate location for new homes, either for the travelling or settled communities. The site is surrounded by major roads, the East Coast Main Line, and shadowed by high voltage power cable pylons. The site has no access, the site is heavily contaminated, and it has no gas, electricity or sewerage connections. Resolving these issues is likely to cost the Council more than £1.75 million if a CPO is to come forward. The officer's addendum also confirms that the costs associated with the delivery of the site are significant and that the Council do not have evidence to demonstrate that all the necessary resources are available to deliver the project. These deliverability and suitability issues have been raised, as you've heard, by inspectors when determining other appeals for similar accommodation in the district, and the council has been criticised for the reliance upon the Michelin farm allocation because it doesn't provide private pitches or a choice of sites to meet the needs of the community, and as a consequence the policy approach does conflict with national policy. Recognising the council's urgent and pressing need for the gypsy and traveller accommodation across the district, the applicant has increased the Section 106 contribution to £600,000, and it is expected that that contribution will be used to deliver alternative sites, which also avoids having to pursue an extremely costly and uncertain CPO process.
1 minute. Thank you.
The opportunity before you this evening is therefore both significant and compelling. At the heart of the proposals lies an undeniable boost to the local economy, as you've heard. 800 full-time equivalent jobs, £1 million in business rates, and £16 million of direct investment through construction. The application responds to strong market demand. It will deliver 30,000 square metres of modern warehousing and presents a unique opportunity for the district. Turning down this application represents a significant reputational and financial risk to the council by saying no to jobs and investment because of a gypsy and traveller site in the wrong location that may never come forward. I therefore urge you to support this planning application with our increased Section 106 offer, which will genuinely assist in meeting the district's needs for gypsy and traveller accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Visiting councillors, Councillor Simon Wootton, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members. I visited this site a few weeks ago in the company of the Assistant Director of Planning and the Chief Executive Officer. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the development and the work that has been done to tidy up what was an untidy site, dreadfully contaminated following a major fire. The scheme, where phase 1 is now at an advanced stage, will provide significant economic regeneration and employment opportunities for the benefit of our community, and I welcome that. Having said that, we cannot overlook the fact that part of the land, whilst in the current ownership of the developer, is designated under the local plan as a gypsy and traveller site, and as an authority, I believe we have a duty to deliver that. To a large extent, there has been a very little engagement with Rochford District Council by the developer on how to work together to meet these obligations. And, Madam Chairman, if I may read out an email that I wrote following a presentation to certain members of the Executive earlier this year on the 1st of March, and I would like to place this on record. Dear Marcus, I referred to our meeting earlier today with the developers for Michelin's farm. The site was bought by the current owners in the full knowledge that there was an allocation for a gypsy and traveller site, and this was probably reflected in the value. It is clear from our meeting that phase 2 planning application is coming forward very soon, which completely disregards this provision and is seeking to justify why the allocation is being ignored for technical reasons and using appeal precedents which the developers feel supports their case. Now, in isolation, I believe the proposed scheme looks excellent. There is, however, a principle here. What is the point of making allocations and then developers coming along only to drive a coach and horse through what is considered a long-established local plan? I think we need to be proactive here and consider a CPO on the designated land in order to protect it for its intended purpose. It is no good as an authority us coming up with the designated sites for travellers and then, when they are not developed, us taking the flak for then being accused of not providing for that sector of our community. So realistically, Madam Chairman, this is a difficult decision for the committee tonight. But last night we had a briefing talking about a designated site within the local plan. And here we are tonight, potentially faced with lifting a site out of the designated local plan. It would be totally inconsistent for us to do that. It is pleasing that of late discussions have been taking place with the developer, and it is an arbitrary view as to what value you put on a piece of land. My own preference would have been for the developer at the outset to work with us in delivering the intended purpose. The reason, if I may say, that the developer points to the fact that there is no access is because the developer has not provided for any access. So it is as simple as that. The scheme, if it had been worked on from the outset, would have provided for egress. So it is for the committee to consider whether we deal with a point of principle here. Should a multi-million-pound developer be allowed to buy their way out of a scheme for intended purpose, or should they be held to work with Rochford District Council on delivering a scheme that was intended as a gypsy and traveller site? Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe, have you anything you would like to say? Councillor Newport, a mic will be coming to you. And again, you'll have 5 minutes. Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, many of you will know that the issue of delivering this particular traveller site in our land allocation has gone on for far too long. And I support the leader, Councillor Wootton, in his comments. We should not bow to the pressures put on the committee by the developer at a risk of appeal. We have a duty to all of our residents, both settled and the traveller community. There is a legal obligation by this council to bring forward a traveller site. We have been criticised heavily by a planning inspector for not doing this. The questions that I would have, and this is a question both for our council and officers, is that I note from the report that neither Essex County Council or the Traveller Unit has a capital budget to bring the site forward. So in order to strengthen our case against a possible appeal, I would like to see the council commit to a budget to bring forward our traveller site. What would the legal ramifications to the council be of not bringing forward this allocated site and the provision of this gypsy and traveller site as the law dictates? It is a fine line. Yes, there are jobs on the line, but we're also told that there are 1.1 million vacancies in the UK. So I'd just like you to bear that in mind also when making the decision. Thank you.
The ward councillor is Councillor Lorman. Yes, that is you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Ringing in my ears here. I just want to say that I was one of those that went on the site visit, and I found that very informative, and it was worthwhile. I have to support what our leader said, Councillor Wootton. But when I was over there, people keep talking about entry. We were entered by a site entrance at the side, which literally adjoined the car parking where we were, which literally adjoined this site. And I cannot see why that can't be, why we have to go through all the yard and everything else, when you could come in through what is now currently a site entrance near the back of that house and come straight into the gypsy site. So I was concerned. I did have a lot of thoughts about it, you know, on the balance of would it stand up to an appeal, etc., etc. But I have to say that everything I've heard so far, I have to support, and it is in our local plan. So I must say that I personally moved to accept the recommendation from the planning.
And we've got a second to Mr. Councillor, Mrs. Mason. Mrs. Mason.
Thank you. Is this one on?
Yes,
I can hear you. Wipe it down, please.
Right, thank you, Madam Chairman. In my view, this is a simple matter of principle, and the application is unfortunately premature and, in my view, opportunist. My understanding is that a site in the local plan remains an allocated site, and it is not usual for that site to be removed from the allocation, even in a new local plan, unless it is established with strong and irrefutable evidence that the site is not deliverable. If it was established that the site was no longer viable, it would then be required to be reassessed, and it would be judged on either the requirements of the new local plan or on its merits. Nevertheless, at this point in time, the site is still considered RDC's main and only allocated site for gypsy and travellers in our local plan. The financial information should not sway or determine the planning process, and regardless of the financial incentives to do otherwise, the Council has a moral and legal obligation to provide suitable accommodation for gypsy and travellers in our area. This is the only site that has been identified as suitable. However, in this case, the site in question is under investigation by the Council for compulsory purchase in order to implement the allocation of the local plan. It is to be regretted that the local plan, having been adopted in December 2011, that the Council has only recently undertaken this investigation, and the delay in providing a timeframe for determination has not facilitated clarity. That said, I totally support the officer's recommendation for refusal on the grounds that the application is contrary to our adopted plan and that the Council is actively investigating the viability of pursuing the compulsory purchase of the gypsy and traveller site allocation in order to implement its local plan. And I certainly second that. I would also like to add, if Councillor Lorman is agreeable, and if it's agreeable to the Chair, that we recommend that a budget is put aside to for this. I'm not sure if it's appropriate in this committee. No, I thought it wouldn't be, but I was trying. Thank you. So I second the officer's recommendation for refusal for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. We're talking to the recommendation, but just depending on which way it goes, just a couple of questions to know. Have we got a full range of conditions in place if we do end up talking to approval? And secondly, the 600k that was mentioned, have we got that formally in writing? Because I do understand it was a late change. To the motion that's before us, to me this revolves around the council's ability to deliver the compulsory purchase. I don't underestimate the scale of the challenge in doing that. The location of the site, the potential for lack of cooperation with the current developer, and the need to challenge and work out the various arrangements which will involve legal representation. The scale of the contamination that is on the site is also a great concern because it is unknown. It is not just tyres. It was quite clear to see on site that there's a wide range of things. I'm balancing that against the economic loss to the district, potentially direct employment, and the benefit to the council from increased business rates. Then as a council ourselves, we do have to consider our ability to deliver a compulsory purchase. We have reserves, as everyone knows, but they are earmarked for a wide variety of issues, and this would be a new burden on the council. And in assessing the deliverability of the site, I think that is a relevant point.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, I don't think that's talking to the motion on the table.
The other two items that are under consideration for deliverability are the support that we've had from the Essex Gypsy and Traveller unit. They might not have a budget, but we've had this site allocated for quite some time, and I don't think they've been nudging us too hard on the delivery element of it. And then finally, I think I do have to just express my concern with the way in which the developer has gone about doing this. It's as an experienced developer, I think they could have gone about this in a much more collaborative way. I'm not swayed one way or the other. I'm on the fence. I will normally always go with the officer recommendation because it is a professional point of view, but I am wanting to hear the comments of other members before I make my mind up as to which way I'll raise my hand. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Hoy. Councillor Stanley, at the beginning, I did ask every member to wipe the mics while you're passing them forward because of the COVID situation that we still have. So that's what I was asking. Everyone in front of them has got hand sanitizer and wipes, okay? It's just to keep you safe and other members. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hoy.
Get a gold star, do I? I'll be brief. There's clearly a real demand for a traveller site within the district. It's evidenced by the ad hoc applications that have taken place over the years where we have no defence to them. And this is because we've failed to provide a traveller site. I think it's important we do not lose this site. It's designated as a proposed traveller site in our local plan, and it will meet our commitment to the travelling community. I have to say, nothing I've heard tonight has persuaded me that this council should deviate from that plan or the allocation, and I support Councillor Norman's motion for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley. Stanley. Please use them.
I think if you use sanitizer, you'll be fine.
Councillor Stanley, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It's been quite a discussion coming on from 2011 or whatever it was, 2009, when this was discussed, and the council has inadvertently left it on the back burner for such a long time, which I'm surprised at what we are now endeavouring to do. From Councillor Smith's remarks on the cost of doing the work, and there's no supply of anything on the site, nothing at all. So all that's got to go in the way of sewage and what have you. There is an awful lot to do, and I have to say that with remarks from Councillor Newport in the way of, have we got allocation funds for that? No, we haven't. Yes, we have got reserves, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's going to be more than what I think the developer has estimated. I do believe that, you know, by the time we get round to doing it, maybe in 5 years' time, even if we do a CPO order, that will only last for 6 years with the regulation that's applied with that. And it will come back to us again and again. And we've got to make the decision. We've got to make the decision, and it's a fine decision we are going to make. I mean, I'm on the fence as well. It's touch and go. At the moment, with the way that we are planning for the future for housing and people coming into the district and what have you, we need the employment as well. So it is something which we've got to weigh up as a council. It's not just this committee, it's everybody we work for. And it's
Well, actually, it is
difficult.
this committee that will be making the decision.
Yes, I
Councillor
realise
Sally.
the committee makes the decision, but there is a lot to consider. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table from Councillor Lawman. Oh, sorry, Councillor Foster. You need to put your hand up, so higher. And Councillor Weston? No, after Councillor Foster, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I find myself sitting on the same fence as a couple of other councillors. Absolutely agree with the need. I understand the CPO, and that may be an expensive process. I'm not seeing anything that tells us where the budget for actually developing it would come from. All I've read says nobody's got any budget for it. And given that, is there a reasonable prospect of an application being made for the site to become a traveller site?
Thank you very much. Councillor Weston, have you a mic anywhere near?
Don't look at me like that, please.
I wasn't looking at you, thankfully.
Thank you, Chairman. I think most of the members have said really what I was going to say. I think I have to agree with quite a few of them. I'm sitting on the fence as well. I find it very hard and difficult that we've had this allocation. It's only an allocation for Egyptian Traveller's Site, and it's been sitting there for quite a few years. You've got a company that owns a site that wants to fulfil it by hopefully making more jobs, etc., for our community and bringing money into Rochford. So again, I'm very much sitting on the sidelines or sitting on the fence, and I'm going to find it very, very difficult to where I'm putting my vote tonight. Thank you,
Thank you very
Chairman.
much, Councillor Weston. Councillor Sperring.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't find myself sitting on a fence at all. I cannot condone some of the things that have gone on in the past and all the rest of it. At the long and the short of it is, this is an allocated site, and potentially, my personal view is, if we don't follow this through, we will be opening up a floodgate in years to come where other allocated sites are then using this as a criteria of why we shouldn't conform with what we've already agreed is an allocated site. This is an allocated site for gypsy travellers, and I think we should do our utmost to see it through. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does any other member require to speak? No show of hands. So we've had a motion to refuse it. So can I have a show of hands for refusal, please?
Madam Chairman, can I ask for my vote to be recorded?
Yes, of course. You can take your hands down, members. Can I have a show of hands for approval? Refusal? Approval? Sorry. Against refusal. Get the right wording. No? No. Abstentions, please.
We've never done this about twice.
Could I have my vote recorded, please?
Of course.
It's not a vote, it's an abstention.
But it's abstention, so it will be recorded as an abstention. So the application is refused, members. And do we know the numbers, please, Sonia? 4 abstentions, 9 refusals. Thank you, members. Thank you very much for a good debate tonight. And I close the meeting at 9 something, 8:53. Thank you.
That was hard.